Hello, ladies. Thank you for joining us all for this caregiving journey for Zoom virtual panel. We're excited to have you with us today. And the three of us on the panel are seriously. So just when I think that I know what I'm doing, my huzzah, the three of us on the panel today are myself. Which I am a fully licensed financial advisor with Raymond James. And Isabel, would you like to introduce yourself and then Ariel?
Of course, I'm Isabel Melgarejo. I support family caregivers with planning, having difficult conversations, and self-care.
All right, and I am Arriel Balogun. I am a revenue operations consultant and the RevOps career coach at Infinitely Elevated. I help, excuse me, I've been on both sides of the caregiving journey, both as an employee and as a business owner, and I just look forward to sharing my experiences and how I've also navigated both sides of it.
Mhm. Okay. I think actually I'm gonna allow all of our participants to talk if they would like so we can be a little interactive. And I've stopped sharing the screen, so I think they should be able to see us all now.
Yeah.
Um, so Ariel, would you like to go first in what motivates you in your work and business?
It's such a great question. There's so much that happens in my business being both a consultant and a career coach. So I think overall, just helping women, helping humanity, whether it's careers or in your business, and really able helping people be able to really turn the needle in terms of what they're looking for and achieving their goals. So it just brings me much joy to be able to do that with my superpowers, to be honest. I want
Isabel,
to
do
go
you want
to
to do
Isabel.
some? Oh, yeah.
I became a caregiver when I was 20, 21. I don't know about that time in life. My dad passed away suddenly. My mom at the time was fighting cancer, so I became her caregiver. I was also responsible for closing my dad's chapter on Earth. And there was no plan. Absolutely nothing was planned. It was very overwhelming. It was a lot of work, no support. I felt like it was all on me, and if I was not doing anything, nobody would take upon those things. Moving forward to today, my mom, a couple of years ago, my mom fell and broke her nose. And that was the moment in which I knew that I didn't want to go through the same situations of just turning fires over and over. So that's why I gave myself the idea of supporting caregivers because I don't want people going through that process. And I think if we've been in that situation, we know how overwhelming it can be and how we can um how a plan can actually change everything. How having the courage of saying this is it, I'm not doing that can mean a lot for our mental health, for our well-being, and for the whole family. So I think both of you, Tracy, Ariel, you've experienced that. You've experienced like saying, stop, I'm not doing these anymore has helped you. So, um, why don't you share those experiences with everybody here?
Yeah. So you and I met when I had very first moved here, and I had moved back home adjacent because my parents were aging, my in-laws were aging, my dad's cancer diagnosis was getting um more and more dire. And up to the very end, he was in denial about how sick he was and how much help he needed. And of course, in my work, women aren't taught to, like, we're taught to balance a checkbook, not how to build wealth, not how to do all of these things. And then running a business, trying to help them with their health issues, trying to manage a ranch that my dad had been fairly secretive about how the day-to-day runnings went. Um, I was stretched way too thin. I was trying to be everything to everyone, and I wasn't doing a good job of taking care of my family. I wasn't doing a good job of taking care of my parents or the cattle or my clients, and I felt like I was failing everyone. So when we met and started having conversations about what it might look like to have support as a caregiver, build this community of other caregivers and people in similar situations, and figuring out like what can we do to help them. One of the biggest things that my clients talk to me about is, how can I afford to do this? How do I have a conversation with my parents of, you can afford to pay for help. I would like to be compensated for my time off, or I'm willing to do this and this, but you can't afford to pay someone to do this part that I don't want to do and I'm not willing to do. And just how to set those boundaries, to have support and standing by those boundaries was really amazing. And, we've unintentionally walked through the sunset of both of my parents since we met. And very happy to be in this community, have this support, and now be able to help and support other women.
Yeah. I'll
It
add to
is,
that.
I love your story because it is so powerful how you changed everything and how you were able to move around things and become aware. You've always been aware of how hard it can be for women to to build wealth. We are not we're not used to it. So, and we're not taught to build wealth and think about it. So, what do you recommend people to build that wealth, to create strategies that work? Because eventually in the caregiving journey, there's a point in which you're either cutting back on hours or you are um or you don't know what to do with money, or do you get a loan? Do you ask for money? Do you stop working? What do you do? Like, what are your strategies?
So I think a lot of it depends on the final financial situation of your parents. And are they in a situation where they have funds, or potentially a long-term care policy, or some kind of annuity with a double payout? Those are newer. I would be surprised if many parents had those right now. But what is your parents' situation and what can they afford? If you're in a family where their fixed income, it's all Social Security and Medicare, and they're barely covering their bills, that has to be taken into consideration. They may not be able to pay for additional help, so it might fall back more on you. But if they are in a situation where they have assets, they can afford to pay for help, then it becomes being brave enough to ask them to actually do that. And I don't want to dismiss how hard that conversation can be, because my parents' excuse was they had been running an ad in the paper for months and no one wanted to work. And I was like, um, you've been running a classified ad in your town newspaper whose median age is not that different from yours, asking someone to come support you at home. Like, that's not where you find someone, that's not how you find help in 2026, you know, and they knew that. They knew that very well, but that was a way that they could say, but we tried, and so now you need to come do it for free because we couldn't find anyone else to do it. Um, and I hope that other people's parents aren't quite that manipulative. But that was, one of the hard things that we had to go through was here's a list of people who are willing to do this work. They are willing to come do this work for you. You can't afford to pay them and I'm not going to do it for free. Next step, if your parents are not in that situation, is what is your budget? How is your household budget, and is there any slack there? Could you afford to work fewer hours and still make your own financial commitments? Because you have to take care of you first. Very much like the airplane scenario. If you don't put your oxygen mask on, you can't help anyone else. So, and I've had a few prospects in the last month that, they did quit their job and they did pull from their retirement to help take care of their parents. And now they're starting over from scratch. And what took them 20 years to build before, they're trying to rebuild in 7 years. If you go into that intentionally, that's one thing. But if you backslide into it from pressure and guilt, that's a very different situation. So, what does your budget look like at home? What are your cash savings? What's it going to cost you in income tax and penalties to access those cash savings? And then what's the timeline for rebuilding those savings if you have to use them? That's something we can crunch numbers with together. I'm happy to sit down with anyone on this Zoom or either of your communities just to be a sounding board, to do that budget math. Once we know what they can afford and what their parents can afford, then you can kind of move forward with what kind of conversation do I need to have with my employer to make all of this happen?
Yeah.
And that's beyond my specialty. So,
Yeah. Thank you, Tracy. I'll talk about the career and employer relationship there. In times where, I was coaching more clients in terms of their careers, these conversations would come up. And before I really like dive into that, I'd like to share a little bit about my experience kind of juggling it as the sandwich generation. So I have two small children of my own, 3 and 16 months at the time of this recording. But I also have a mother who recently retired, and I have a grandmother who is definitely retired. She's a Spitfire, but she had her own set of health challenges as well. So not only am I managing my own life and business and clients and children, I'm also supporting my mother and as well as my grandmother. So it's a multi-generational effect there. And having given birth to my kids and still, expected to show up for my mother and grandmother, that is a challenge. And you figure out how to come up with your own boundaries and say no when you need to say no to things and kind of preserve your peace and preserve your energy. It is doable. It's challenging, but it's doable. And then now just kind of like dovetail into how that kind of conversation can come into play when you are seeing yourself in situations like Traci or mine or Isabel, and you're at work, you don't have your own business, and you're thinking, oh man, what do I do? We didn't necessarily come up with a plan if mom or dad, gets sick or is injured, and how we're going to rally and support. The first thing I would say is definitely making sure that you know your rights before going into any, conversation with your employer. Um, Again, if you've been on the job for at least a year, you may qualify for, federal FMLA. That is a path that you can really think through in terms of, and you can go on your state website as well and look at state laws to see if there are, you know, if there are more generous um, policies than the federal FMLA to be able to support more family members because it's typically constrained to just your immediate family. So I would say just understand where you fit, where you fall, either on federal FMLA or even state. The next thing I would say in terms of like navigating this, in terms of what your options could be before you actually take it to the, your manager or your employers, also check the company policy. So there's times where I've asked my clients that are also facing similar situations to say, what is the company stance on this? Have you seen it in play? How have you gotten support before? Or if you've never gotten support from your employer, how you can really think about how to step through that conversation in an informed way rather than reactive or just kind of sitting back to wait. Um, if there are folks that in terms of your colleagues, other team members that have gone on leave or needed support from the company, I would also suggest tapping them and say, hey, I have some things going on and I know you either recently came back from leave or I heard that you were considering it. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience, what was asked of you, what was needed in terms of the conversations with HR, or if you're at a larger organization and they have like an accommodation, a third party accommodation specialist or team, like what was that process like? What things came into play in terms of evaluating if you qualify for certain company benefits and policies? I would say definitely take them off site. Try not to have these conversations during company hours, like, during a break or a lunch break, just to see what those options are before you actually, involve your manager and HR team. I would say that. So those are kind of like my main talking points in terms of like navigating this with your employer. But like I said, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a career coach. I've helped people navigate these conversations, and it really the information in the power lies in the information that you can find. So I would say start there and then gain the support that you need. A little long-winded. But definitely wanted to make sure that I chimed in on the employer aspect of it. Tracy, you were talking about it.
I
Yeah,
think it is
that's
really important to consider the employer because we often, when we're building a difficult conversation, and you all know this, well, Traci and Ariel, um, it, we know that when we go into a conversation in which we want to get something about, one of the key components is having information about what the other person or your employer or whomever you're having, what they're expecting.
Mhm.
Um, because even if the policies are really good in your company, you still need to perform. You still need uh, to achieve your goals within your job. You still as a human being, you're still expected to be a wife, a mom, uh, child, you're still expected to fulfill certain roles. And how do we go from there? So, what are some good like what is good advice that you can give our Ariel in regards of going to your employer and getting that information? Because sometimes those policies you can ask for those policies, but sometimes they are not that clear. It's not black and white. This is you have the right for this or that. You have to like sort of, and sometimes you have to negotiate with maybe um maybe working from home or having a hybrid kind of situation. So how do you go when it is not clear? How do you gather that information without having to show all your cards?
The first thing I would say, Isabel, is document everything, every single thing. Um, because you want to make sure that you are held to, the framework that you're putting forth with your employer. So if you're documenting, like, I'm asking for this accommodation, A, what is it? How this could impact your role, what you're doing to mitigate the impact for your role in your team, and if you're planning to make up hours or work offline or work outside of business hours, can that be accommodated and understood and accepted by your manager, by your leadership team? And to Tracy's point earlier, these are not easy conversations at all. And so being in a place where you're informed with information, you're documenting it, you're referencing company policy, or you're referencing the laws that you believe are applicable is part of that process. So doing your homework is a really, really big part of coming into this conversation because you need the help. Um, this isn't my normal spiel in terms of talking about careers and things like that. This is not the very sexy conversations that we have, but they're the real conversations that are needed. And in doing research, I saw that it says the Clio Institute estimates that caregiver employees cost U.S. employers over $33 billion annually in lost productivity, and most of the cost is absorbed silently by the caregivers themselves. So that's myself, Tracy, Isabel, that are taking time away from work, or if God forbid you have to leave your job entirely where and now there's no income coming in. You absorb that as a caregiver, and there's no one to kind of prop you up in terms of support. And that's hard. It's a very hard decision to make. And when we are navigating these very difficult conversations, you're leaning into how has the company handled this before? Or if this happened 6 years ago, into your mind, can you find someone that's in your network where, they've asked for leave recently to see how the current team has handled this situation? How has, if your manager has been part of, leave conversations, how have they navigated? What did you see with the other employees in terms of their accommodations that may match your style and also support the company because they've been there, done that before? That's what you're looking for. You're looking for a pattern to see, could I do the same or similar things in terms of getting the support so that I can keep my job, show up as a caregiver, show up for myself and my family, and be able to feel a little less guilty about juggling it all, a little less burdensome about juggling it all. But timing is everything. I would say, please don't wait until things are dire and you're kind of like under the gun, if you will, to say I have to like help my mom tomorrow, like, I have to do this right away, and there's no time for preparation because companies, some are not as flexible with the timing of it, and to be honest. So the more time that you can give and the more you can prepare in advance, I think that's where we're all coming from a place of preparedness, in terms of like how you want to navigate the conversation, how you want to navigate the finances, how you want to navigate the conversation with your family so that things are covered and you're not, working from a place where you are very tight on time or under pressure and you have to kind of make knee-jerk reactions. Like not the best way, and it adds a lot more pressure than needed sometimes. Sometimes we don't know, but if you are noticing your parents are aging, good sign to say, let's check in, family. Let's let's have a conversation. How are we planning to help mom or help dad in this situation? Who else could we call upon? Extended family members to support if we need. I think having those conversations, none of them are easy, but they're necessary.
And to your point, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with a client, and she was mentioning um, about how she was taking upon her the role of being the primary caregiver, even though her parents were in another state. She had to fly over back and forth. And I think one of the things that we need to be very conscious about is letting that responsibility go and fall on somebody else. And that is a conversation that we need to have with us, not with anybody else. Because a lot of the times we are very adamant that we have to do all the work, that we have to be the ones responsible, that nobody can do the work better than we do it, that we know everything and nobody is going to do it as well or know as much as we do. And probably that is true. Probably we've been in that situation the longest. Probably we've been um, in more doctor's appointments. We've heard it all. We've gone through everything. That doesn't mean that other people can't achieve the same results. If you talk about eating healthy, I'm pretty sure all of us here have different ideas of what eating healthy means. For some, it includes eating beef. For others, it is not eating beef because whatever your perspectives are, you can say it is good for, like, you need the protein from the beef, and from other people, it's like, hey, let's save the planet. So the same happens in the caregiving journey. You have to be very honest about what your role is. And I find that is really hard for a lot of caregivers because we need to have control over everything. We don't want to let it go. And I know for me at least it was very hard. I felt that I was no longer the most important child. And that was really, really tough for me, knowing that I had to let go of control and give it to somebody else. And I do encourage people to have that conversation with themselves, like understand what is there and what is the role that you want to have.
Mhm. Yeah, that
Um,
conversation. Oh, go ahead, Isabel. Sorry.
no, 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 go
Well,
ahead.
that came up in the conversation with my grandmother. She had a growth in her brain, and they had to do surgery, and they had to do some, post-care treatment, things like that. And so I wanted to be that grandchild, like the favorite, like show up, do the things, go to the appointments, all the stuff, and that was a lot. And like I said, I have two small children. I have a business to run. And I say, well, I can't absorb this all on my own. I talked to my sister who lives on the East Coast. I talked to my uncles, my mother, to see how can we, maybe each take a day to support grandma. Like, how could we maybe think about what that looks like? My sister actually flew in for a few weeks to really absorb a lot of that. I said, well, I can change, the days that I work so that I am like a little bit lighter on Mondays and Fridays and I can come by. Or, she just was like, I can handle it. I can handle it. I've got it. I'm like, God, she's, 80 plus. But I've got it. I said, well, how about this? I can just come over with the boys on the weekend, just to kind of take your mind off of things. Those were my boundaries. Monday, Friday, weekends. I can dedicate that to you. I can support. I can take out trash. I can do dishes like when I'm here. whatever you need. And so having that conversation about like, when I thought about it, I said, I want to be there every single day, even if it would, break me in doing so. And like my business would suffer and my clients would suffer as well. Really being able to step back and say, you know what, think about it a little bit more and come up with a different plan. Sometimes it takes a little while for that kind of the reality and the wants in your brain to kind of connect. But it is a good way to think about it first before you kind of spring into action.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience was so wildly different. I did not want to be at every doctor's appointment, at everything. We we being my family unit, my husband, my children, myself, we wanted to support. We wanted to let my dad specifically maintain his independence. And my mom kept like layering on the guilt. And she would remind me entirely too often about how she moved in with my grandparents and took care of them 2 weeks at a time, alternating with her sister. And because she wanted that attention. And it really didn't have anything to do with what I needed and what was healthy for me, because she wanted me to be there all the time just so that she would feel loved and special and be the center of attention, which was really, really hard because that was a pattern, a hurtful pattern over our whole life. And so she would very frequently use that manipulation of who's the favorite child this week and who's the ousted child this week with my siblings and I. And I knew going into this process that we would need boundaries, physical, financial, and emotional. And Isabel really helped me put words to those boundaries, that I couldn't come up with myself, which was very helpful. But then after mom passed and it was just dad, and he did genuinely need that help. It was a very different, like, how do we balance this? And Isabel, can you speak to, I know I am very type A. I love a paper calendar. I love a to-do list. You give me a task and I just boom, 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 boom. My brother and my father are very, we'll take care of whatever comes up today and it will be fine. And so I was wanting them to make a schedule to give me some heads up, some space, some structure to this caregiving. And as of this recording, they were never capable of putting that together. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how to navigate a situation where what you need might be something that your co-caregivers or your parents just aren't wired to give?
I think I love that question because we often assume that people are like us. Um, Even in knowledge, I'm pretty sure that for Tracy and for you, Ariel, um, getting that calendar and getting everything scheduled comes naturally to you. You don't have to think about it. You just do it. It's easy. But it is not easy for everybody. And one of the things that I always talk with people is like, okay, step back and try to understand where the other person is coming from. I think a very common conversation amongst seniors is you have to give up driving. Um, and that is what I love this conversation because it shows how we come from different perspectives. So we come from the perspective, I don't want you killing somebody and killing yourself because it's not safe how you drive. And our parents come from the perspective of, I don't want to lose independence. I still want to go to my cricket game every Thursday, and I want to go to church every Sunday, and I want to visit my friends every Monday. And if I don't have a car, I will lose that liberty of going and doing whatever I want to do. And the same happens with that conversation. Like, hey, I need a list of where I'm going to fit in. And it is about where you meet people at. How do you bridge that gap? It's making it's doing your homework. Ariel said that very well. Go research, go read the manuals, the policies. Um, when it is personal, we don't have policies. There is no paper that says these are the values of this family, these are the policies of this family. That doesn't exist in a family, but they do exist. And we just assume them because we know the other person so well. We don't dare to ask. And that is something, just go and ask questions. What is your perspective regarding this? So for you, Tracy, it could have been like a conversation like, hey, what is the hardest for you to do? What do you find you really need help at? And start a research, like doing research and being curious about that. How, okay, so this is the hardest part for you to do. What do you find it the hardest? Why? How do you do it? Do you need like do you ask for help or is it just you? Is it physically challenging or is it just you don't like the task? Um
Yeah.
so asking those questions and getting curious about those things and doing your homework really helps when you're building a plan because you're bridging what everybody's thinking and whatnot. And that is a lot of the times what is missing in families. We don't go and do our homework. We do homework at work because there's documents that make it easy for us. We don't have to have another difficult conversation with someone asking those questions. What we don't know is that by having those conversations and by being curious, you're building the path to making that hard conversation that is coming down the road easier. Because when Tracy's going back with her brother and dad, it's like, okay, this is the situation. Dad, you find difficult doing ABC. Brother, you find it impossible to make XYZ. This is how I can help, and this is what do you think about it? What do you think about this? So instead of asking for them to build a plan, which might not be their forte, you build it for them.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
but, did you want to go ahead, Tracy?
No, go ahead.
Oh, it for me it looked like a spectrum. I said I could be very, very, very hands-on and it could look like this, or here's kind of middle of the road, or here's kind of what a gentle approach could be, and kind of giving folks a scenario of like what things can entail to really start that conversation because sometimes folks just don't know. They haven't thought about it. And I'll talk about like my experience with my mother. And I said, I'm just starting to have the conversation. You're retired now, but like as you get older, what does care look like for you? when you're no longer able to do things for yourself, or if you get hurt, Lord forbid you get hurt, who do you want to take care of you? What does that look like? I had to get into her finances as well and say, like, can we actually afford some of these things that you're talking about? Or how will we supplement that if we can't do that? Um, so just kind of giving people like an idea to kind of draw upon, because some folks are literally starting from zero. And if this is your family, you meet them where they are and you try, again and again to figure that out. So just don't give up just because it's a little hard and it takes time and there's some steps involved. It is possible. We've all done it in various capacities. So this is our empowering of you to be able to do the same thing. And Tracy, you were going to say something?
I love what Isabel said about asking questions and being curious. I find with finances, and especially with finances with our parents, sometimes there's some embarrassment or shame about what they don't have. And sometimes there's concern about sharing with the kids how much they've actually saved, depending on your family structure and dynamics. So just gently planting those seeds of, hey, mom and dad, you're retired now, or maybe, in the case of my dad, like, you live alone. So, what is your plan if you trip over the dog? What is the plan if you're out feeding cattle and you fall? Like, do you always have your phone on you? And then that can lead into, like you said, if we need to send you to a physical therapy facility, does your insurance cover that? Like, what kind of coverage do you have with your health insurance? Do you have a supplemental policy? Did you ever apply for long-term care? What insurance? What does that look like? Would you mind sharing those details with me? Or um, don't don't jump into the deep end of, I'd love to have a conversation with you and the attorney, or you and your financial advisor, because that typically is a quickly slammed door and they're defensive. But if you start gently planting the seeds of, I don't want you to be in a situation where an accident becomes an emergency, becomes a tragedy. So can we can we fill out this packet of papers to put in a red envelope and a magnet on the fridge? Can we review your health insurance in case I have to help you find a physical therapist? Just very gently, and you still might get that slammed door in your face, because that generation is incredibly private. But by gently dripping, you might be able to start beginning to have those conversations. And then hopefully, take those little nuggets of information and go back, do your own research, and have some resources ready. And also then have those conversations with your immediate family of, what do I need? What can we do to fill in those gaps when we need to? So we've got about 15 minutes left. Isabel, can you tell us what you think the most important thing they can do to be prepared before a triggering life event happens?
Have everything in order.
Well, that's a unicorn.
Um,
Right.
I think I divide it in five different categories. One is the legal aspect. So go talk with an attorney. Um, that attorney is gonna probably do all of like she will be able to do absolutely everything for you. Um, Talk with a financial advisor, number two. Get your finances, see, like, understand your money. And by understanding is money is very emotional for all of us. I'm pretty sure Tracy has a financial advisor that guides her because her money is emotional for her. Um, but she doesn't care about the money of her clients. So she does, but she doesn't. Like she's not gonna cry if
Yes.
the market crashes. She's not gonna cry if that money is lost. That's what I mean. Um, but she care. So talk with someone who's not gonna be emotional about that. Um, so those are the two big. Like, do you have everything covered legally and financially? And then there's like the other components that are equally important. First, health is very important. Do you have a binder with all of your health stuff? Your doctors, what you have, which medications, all of it. Home arrangements. Um, where do you want to live? How do you want to live? What do you want to experience? And I think this and the last part, which is the social component, who is going to be there? Who's your community? And by who's your community is not just your doctor, your financial advisor, is who are the friends that are there for you, who goes visits you, who goes and plays dominoes with you, or who do you go and visit? And so that is really important. And then the part of like home and how you live, we usually focus on the big stuff. We focus on buying the house, buying the car, buying the insurance. What we never focus on is how we experience joy on a daily basis. And that can be so crucial because that changes your perspective completely on your journey. When you're um for example, for me in particular, I love candles. And I have a bunch of candles and I turn them on and I love it. And for me, that is even if I want to make my shower even better, I will turn a candle even if it's for 5 minutes. But that for me, it's such a big joy, but I'm not gonna check that joy with anybody else. My financial advisor is not gonna care if I buy a $20 candle or not. Um, my if I live in a senior care home, they don't care about the candles. Probably they will care if I burn the building, but my attorney is not gonna care to put in my um on my that's not going to go into any legal documents that they have to put beautiful smells around me. That is not going to happen. Maybe it could, like, maybe it could, but most probably it won't. Um, so those big, like the little details, you have to pay attention to those and how you experience joy every day. So that is my take on things.
Yeah. For me, when I'm helping people get ready to be caregivers, we talk about wants and needs. We need to pay the mortgage, we need to buy food, but sometimes candles can be a need, or a massage, or an hour of respite care a day so that you can go for a walk and clear your head. So be sure to include what you need for your sanity in your budget so that you know okay, if this goes longer than I think it will, I'm willing to cut getting my nails done or getting my hair colored, or mom doesn't have to have cheesy puffs. I don't know. But we absolutely must keep these three things that bring me joy, that bring them joy. These are non-negotiables. Even if nobody understands why that's a non-negotiable, you know what your non-negotiables are. And as a someone who's preparing to be cared for, as their financial advisor, we're going to look at, do you have long-term care insurance? What is a triggering event? How long do we have? What's the exclusion period? What is the daily payout? Do you have annuity income that we can turn on or um, activate extra payouts from? Do you have a life insurance policy that has a living benefit on it? My dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. If he had had a policy with a terminal payout, we might have been able to access some life insurance proceeds while he was still alive. So the conversation is different depending on which side of the coin you're on, but there are important conversations to have with your financial advisor and with yourself before you go have them with your family. And then, Ariel, what is your one takeaway that they need to have as soon as they can?
Yeah. In your caregiving journey, it will look differently at different stages of your life. So the one takeaway that I would say is start learning about the different types of rest. We talk about joy, we talk about planning, but also rest and what that looks like to recover after, a very long day, very daunting. Isabel loves candles, as do I. We're going to have to share some offline. What are our favorites? But in terms of that, I learned a lot about myself, like helping with my mother, helping with my grandmother. And there's 7 different types of rest. I'll start there. And the two that were really fulfilling for me were emotional rest, where it was like space to just feel without performing strength for other people. I tend to be the rock. I hold it all together. I do need that rest to just kind of be alone and feel the feelings. And then the second type of rest that really filled me up was just social rest. So spending time with people that actually restored me rather than drained me. So that was the biggest learning moments for myself in, so far in my caregiving journey, when to kind of step back, take some rest, and knowing it could look different on a different day, a different context. And I think a lot of folks, focus on physical rest was like, I'll just get more sleep and I'll feel better. Then that's not necessarily the case. Like, you think about the other types of rest so that you can sustain your caregiving journey as well.
Nice. We have just about 5 minutes left. We can open it up for questions. Attendees, I turned off your you're not allowed to speak part. So if you have questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can type them in the Q&A. I have that window open so we can see questions if you have any. I work in a very regulated industry. So if you guys will oblige me for a second, I'm going to share my disclosure screen to make Raymond James and our compliance department quite happy. Um, and basically, it is personal finance is personal. Everything that we've shared today is our own experience and our own opinions. They're not the opinions of Raymond James in any way, shape, or form. Nothing today was intended to be a solicitation or a sales pitch. Everything that is in your financial purview is personal to you, and you should have a conversation with your financial advisor about it. And if there's anything at all that I can do to be of service, please reach out. But I think that um, having no questions, I think I can go ahead and end the recording. So.
Thank you all that were able to join us today. And for those of